If you've just completed an intense block of training, your hips, your legs, they need recovery. And the best form of recovery is active, it's dynamic. It's using your muscle tissue, lengthening and shortening your fascia. That's going to give you the quickest and the most comprehensive recovery possible. And to do that, we're going to choose just a few select moves, nothing fancy. The key here is we want to move through a full range of motion, and ideally in compound movements that are going to lengthen those tissues through multiple directions. Let me show you how easy this is with our first move in this series. This is for the hip flexors and quads, and this is a P&F pattern. We're going to perform this laying on our side by flexing the hip, letting the foot drop towards the turf, and this is going to externally rotate, and I'm going to let my knee drop in a little bit as well, so I'm getting a adduction of the hip. I'm going to press this back, and as I press this back, I'm going to roll my shoulders and chest forward, and I'm going to internally rotate and extend the hip. So the whole pattern looks like this. So here's move number 2 in our hip recovery series. We're going to need a gym ball. We're going to place the gym ball. Get your standing foot to be parallel forward rather than toes out. Heel's going to go on the ball. Hands on your hips to keep your hips square. Lengthen and roll. Lengthen and roll. We're lengthening hamstrings here. Many of you do a dynamic warm-up where you'll stretch and scoop. This is going to be another version of that, working your dynamic balance a little bit, and watch that standing foot. So move number 3 targets the lateral quad, the tensor fascia lata up here in the front of the hip, as well as the iliotibial band. I'm going to show you how this one works. You're going to start by laying on your side. Bend your knee, hold your ankle with your hand, roll back until you can just touch your toes. My foot is pointed. Touch your toes to the floor, roll your hips forward, and pull the knee down towards the floor, and then release and roll back. So this move looks like this. If this bottom part gives you a big lateral quad stretch and you want to add to it, drop your foot onto it, and then you can just do some pulses this way. Adjust this stretch by moving your foot further behind you if you're very flexible, and that's going to change it, or flexing your knee more to get more quad. So that is how you are going to stretch the tissue and fascia of your lateral hip and thigh. So here's another move in the hip recovery series. This one is to improve hip extension. We're going to lay prone with the knees bent about 90 degrees and the knees touching. Start to take your heels and push them over to each side. And if you do that while you keep your ankles and your knees together, it's going to start to open your hip and rotate your pelvis. Once you get toward your side, slide that top leg, this one, back so that you're bringing your knee towards your ankle. And then repeat on the other side until eventually you are going to be able to roll all the way over towards your back, and then return, letting your knee drop towards your ankle, slide that forward, roll across, and repeat on the other side. Because so much of what we do causes the hips to flare slightly in our deepest flexion, it is critical that we restore balance and a square hip. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with a move called a runner's pull. I'm going to take the pulley, and I want you to do this with bare feet. Lifting shoes can hide what you're doing with your feet. So your toes are going to be forward, your pelvis must be square. This is very common to have this outside hip swirl open even just a little bit as you're going through a move. And so square those hips, use your opposite hand, get real stretched out, sink deep into that glute and hamstring, and with your hips square, pull up, flex that opposite hip, and then slowly lower down, keeping good knee over ankle and foot alignment. And I am deep into my hip right there. One of my favorite moves is the chop, and this version helps correct muscular imbalances in the hips and pelvis. To do this, I've got this Stroops stick right here. I love using a stick. I'm a surfer and a paddle boarder, and it gives me a bit of that vibe, but a basic handle like this one would also work fine. I'm gonna get into a high knee lunge, so my back foot is not actually touching. My front knee is right over my ankle. I've got the stick, and I am just going to keep straight elbows, twist the bar like that. Let me show you that from the side. If you struggled with your inline lunge on the FMS, which is basically this move, we're gonna get into that similar trunk upright position and press to the outside, keeping your hips square. This is a great move.